Marcus Wellington III had built his empire on precision, control, and an unwavering belief that emotions were liabilities in the business world. At 33, he'd already accumulated more wealth than most people could spend in 10 lifetimes. His penthouse apartment on Manhattan's Upper East Side reflected his philosophy, sleek, modern, and utterly devoid of warmth. Everything had its place, everything served a purpose, and nothing was allowed to disrupt the carefully orchestrated chaos of his life. That Friday evening, Marcus stormed through the marble lobby of his building with thunder in his eyes. The Jakarta deal had fallen through. 3 months of negotiations, countless red-eye flights, and millions in preparation costs, all wasted because some bureaucrat had decided to change the terms at the last minute. His assistant had learned long ago not to speak to him when his jaw was set like that, when his designer shoes struck the floor with that particular angry rhythm. The private elevator couldn't move fast enough. Marcus loosened his tie, his reflection in the mirrored walls showing a man who looked older than his years. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, surviving on black coffee and adrenaline, and now he wanted nothing more than the silence of his empty apartment. But as the elevator doors opened directly into his penthouse, silence was the last thing that greeted him. The sound of laughter, bright, uninhibited, childish laughter, echoed through the usually hushed space. Marcus froze, his hand still on his briefcase. Someone was in his home, his sanctuary, the one place in the entire world where he could escape the demands, the expectations, the endless noise of other people. He moved through the foyer, his footsteps silent on the imported Italian marble, following the sound to the kitchen. What he saw there made him stop dead in his tracks, his anger momentarily displaced by sheer confusion. Elena Rodriguez, his maid of 6 months, stood at his kitchen island, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, flour dusting her cheeks. She was laughing, her whole face transformed by joy as she looked down at a tiny girl perched on a step stool beside her. The child, no more than 3 years old, was covered in what appeared to be cookie dough, her small hands patting at a ball of dough with complete concentration, her tongue poking out slightly from the corner of her mouth. "Elena!" Marcus's voice cut through the warm domestic scene like a knife through butter. "What the hell is going on here?" Elena's head snapped up, her brown eyes widening with shock. The color drained from her face as she quickly wiped her hands on a towel. "Mr. Wellington, I didn't expect you back until tomorrow. The schedule said." "I don't care what the schedule said." Marcus set his briefcase down with more force than necessary. "I want to know why you've brought a child into my home without my permission. This is completely unacceptable. You know the rules. No personal guests. Ever." He watched as Elena's hands trembled slightly while she lifted the little girl off the step stool. The child immediately wrapped her arms around Elena's neck, her big brown eyes, so like her mother's, peeking at Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Wellington," Elena said, her voice tight with anxiety. "My babysitter got sick at the last minute, and I couldn't find anyone else. I know I should have called, but you were in meetings all day, and I thought I was going to have everything cleaned up before you got home. I just needed to finish my shift, and I couldn't afford to miss work, and I'm so sorry." Marcus held up his hand, cutting off her increasingly frantic explanation. He pressed his fingers to his temples, where a headache was beginning to pulse in time with his heartbeat. This was exactly what he didn't need right now. Complications. Excuses. People's messy, inconvenient lives bleeding into his carefully controlled world. "I don't want to hear excuses," he said coldly. "You've violated the terms of your employment. I could fire you right now." He saw Elena's throat work as she swallowed hard. Her arms tightened around the little girl, who had gone very still, as if she could sense the tension in the air. For a moment, Marcus felt something flicker in his chest, something that might have been guilt if he allowed himself to feel such things, but he pushed it down ruthlessly. "Please," Elena whispered, and there was a note in her voice that he'd never heard before. Desperation. "Please, Mr. Wellington. I need this job. My daughter, Sophia, she needs me to have this job. I'll work extra hours. I'll take a pay cut. Just please don't fire me. I promise this will never happen again." Marcus looked at them. This woman who cleaned his home, who made his life run smoothly without him ever having to think about it, and her daughter, who was now studying him with those impossibly large eyes. He realized, with a start, that in 6 months of employing Elena, he'd never asked her a single personal question. He didn't know if she had family. He didn't know where she lived. He didn't know anything about her life beyond the fact that she was punctual, thorough, and invisible, exactly how he preferred his staff. "I'll give you 10 minutes to clean this up and get out," he said finally, his voice flat. "We'll discuss your future employment on Monday. Right now, I need my home to myself." He turned to leave, to escape to his bedroom where he could shut out this entire situation, but then a small voice stopped him in his tracks. "Mama, why is the sad man angry?" Marcus spun around, staring at the child, at Sophia. Her head was tilted to one side, and she was looking at him with an expression of such genuine concern that it took him completely off guard. Not fear. Not resentment. Concern. "Sophia, hush," Elena said quickly, but the little girl wriggled in her mother's arms until Elena had to set her down. Before Marcus could react, before he could retreat behind his walls of ice and indifference, Sophia walked right up to him. She had to tilt her head back to look up at his face, and cookie dough was smeared across her cheek like war paint. She reached up and, with complete confidence, took his hand in her tiny, sticky one. "Don't be sad," she said solemnly. "Mama says when you're sad, cookies make it better. We're making cookies. You want one?" Marcus stared down at this miniature human who had just waltzed into his life and immediately started breaking all his rules. Her hand was warm in his, trusting in a way he couldn't remember ever experiencing. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, Marcus Wellington III found himself completely at a loss for words. Marcus had faced down corporate raiders, negotiated with international diplomats, and stared down CEOs twice his age without flinching. But this 3-year-old girl, with her sticky hand clasped around his fingers and her earnest brown eyes fixed on his face, had managed to render him completely speechless. "Sophia, no." Elena rushed forward, but Marcus held up his free hand, surprising himself as much as her. "It's fine," he heard himself say, though nothing about this situation was fine. He looked down at Sophia, who was still waiting patiently for his answer about the cookies, as if she had all the time in the world. "Why do you think I'm sad?" Sophia considered this seriously, as though he'd asked her to solve a complex mathematical equation. Her nose scrunched up in concentration, and Marcus noticed that she had a small dimple in her left cheek. "Your eyes are sad," she announced finally. "Like when Mama's tired and tries to smile, but her eyes don't smile too. But you're not even trying to smile, so you must be extra sad." The observation hit Marcus with unexpected force. When was the last time anyone had actually looked at him? Really looked at him, beyond the suits and the money and the power? His business associates saw an opportunity or a threat. His acquaintances saw a bank account. Even his own family, what was left of it, saw only the disappointment of a son who'd chosen money over meaning. But this child, who knew nothing about quarterly reports or stock portfolios, had seen something in him that he'd forgotten existed. Elena was watching the exchange with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. There was still fear there, fear of losing her job, but there was something else too. Hope, maybe, or curiosity about what would happen next. "Mr. Wellington," she said carefully, "we really can clean up and go. Sophia, come here, honey. We need to let Mr. Wellington rest." But Sophia didn't move. Instead, she tugged on Marcus's hand with surprising strength for someone so small. Mama made chocolate chip cookies. They're the best. Papa used to say they made any bad day good again. Her face clouded slightly. Papa's in heaven now, but the cookies still work. The words were delivered with such simple certainty that Marcus felt something inside him crack, just a little. He looked at Elena, saw the grief and loss flash across her face before she schooled her features back into professionalism. How much had this woman lost? And yet she still made cookies with her daughter, still found reasons to laugh in his kitchen while he'd been consumed by rage over a failed business deal. The absurdity of it all suddenly struck him. He'd been ready to fire Elena, a single mother who'd clearly been through her own hell, because she dared to bring her child to work when she had no other option. What kind of person did that make him? The kind of person his father had raised him to be, whispered a voice in his head. Cold. Calculating. Successful. Alone. I could use a cookie, Marcus said quietly, and watched Elena's eyes widen in shock. If that's all right. Sophia's face lit up like Times Square on New Year's Eve. Mama, the sad man wants a cookie. We need to bake them faster. Sophia, we don't call people the sad man, Elena said, though Marcus could hear the relief in her voice. This is Mr. Wellington. He's Mama's boss. Mr. Welton? Sophia attempted, frowning at the complicated name. That's too many sounds. Can I call you Mr. W? You can call me Marcus, he said, and realized it was the first time he'd invited anyone to use his first name in months. Maybe years. His business world operated on surnames and titles, on maintaining distance and hierarchy. But standing here in his kitchen, holding hands with a toddler covered in cookie dough, those rules seemed ridiculous. Marcus, Sophia repeated carefully, testing it out. Then she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Okay, Marcus. You can help us bake, but you have to wash your hands first. Mama's very serious about washing hands. Before Marcus could respond, Sophia released his hand and skipped back to the kitchen island, already chattering about how they needed to roll the dough into balls, and how the chocolate chips were the most important part, and how you had to be very careful not to eat all the dough before it got baked. Marcus looked at his hand, still slightly sticky from Sophia's touch, then at Elena, who was watching him with an expression of cautious wonder. Mr. Wellington, you don't have to, she began. Marcus, he corrected. And I know I don't have to, but I'm going to. He shrugged off his suit jacket, draping it over one of the bar stools. Where do I wash my hands? Elena pointed to the sink, still looking like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. Marcus rolled up his sleeves, custom-made shirts that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and scrubbed his hands thoroughly while Sophia supervised, making sure he got all the germs. As he dried his hands on a kitchen towel, Marcus caught his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him was disheveled, tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up, standing in a kitchen about to bake cookies with his maid and her daughter. He looked different somehow, less polished, more human. Okay, he said, turning back to the island where Elena was laying out balls of dough on a baking sheet. What do I do? For the next 20 minutes, Marcus Wellington III, a man whose time was typically billed at thousands of dollars per hour, learned how to properly space cookie dough on a baking sheet. Sophia appointed herself his teacher, giving instructions with the utmost seriousness, while Elena watched with barely concealed amusement. No, Marcus, Sophia would say, shaking her head when he placed a dough ball too close to another. They need room to grow. Cookies are like people. They need space or they get all squished together, and nobody's happy. Marcus found himself smiling, actually smiling at her logic. Is that so? Mama told me. She said people need space to be themselves, and cookies are the same way. Elena's cheeks colored slightly. I may have been explaining the concept of personal boundaries while we were baking last week, she admitted. Using cookies as a metaphor, Marcus said. That's actually brilliant. You do what works, Elena replied with a shrug, but he could see she was pleased by the compliment. As they worked together, the tension in the air gradually dissolved. Sophia kept up a constant stream of chatter, asking Marcus questions ranging from, "Do you have a dog?" to "What's your favorite color?" to "Why do you live in such a big house all by yourself?" That last question made him pause, a ball of cookie dough halfway to the baking sheet. Why did he live in this enormous penthouse alone? He'd told himself it was because he valued his privacy, his space, his ability to control his environment. But standing here, with the warmth of the oven and the sound of Sophia's laughter and the quiet presence of Elena moving efficiently around the kitchen, his apartment felt less like a sanctuary and more like a mausoleum. "I guess I never really thought about it," Marcus admitted. Sophia patted his arm sympathetically. "That's okay. Sometimes Mama says grown-ups forget to think about the important things. That's why kids have to remind them." "Sophia," Elena said, though she was trying not to laugh. "Where do you come up with these things?" "From you, Mama," Sophia replied matter-of-factly, and Marcus watched as Elena's expression softened with such pure love that he had to look away, feeling like an intruder on an intimate moment. When the cookies were finally in the oven, Sophia insisted that Marcus sit with her at the kitchen table while they waited. She produced a coloring book from her mother's bag and solemnly offered him a purple crayon. "Purple's a good color for sad people," she informed him. "It's like blue, but with red in it, so it's trying to be happy." Marcus accepted the crayon, and for the first time since he was a child himself, he colored a picture. Sophia worked beside him, her tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully stayed within the lines of a butterfly. Every so often, she would look over at his work and offer suggestions. "That tree could use more leaves," she'd say, or "maybe the sun should smile." Elena bustled around the kitchen, cleaning up their mess, but Marcus noticed she kept glancing over at them with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. When the timer went off, Sophia abandoned her coloring to press her face against the oven door, watching with rapt attention as Elena pulled out perfect golden brown cookies. "We have to let them cool," Sophia announced, though she was practically vibrating with excitement. "It's the hardest part. Waiting is very hard." "It really is," Marcus agreed, and he wasn't just talking about cookies. The cookies cooled on a wire rack while Sophia entertained Marcus with an elaborate story about her stuffed bunny, Mr. Fluffington, who apparently had adventures that rivaled anything Marcus had experienced in his business travels. He found himself genuinely engaged, asking questions about Mr. Fluffington's narrow escape from the laundry basket and his heroic rescue of a lost sock. Elena worked quietly in the background, restoring Marcus's kitchen to its usual pristine state, though he noticed she kept stealing glances at him and Sophia, as if she couldn't quite believe this was happening. Marcus couldn't quite believe it either. 2 hours ago, he'd been ready to fire her. Now he was being regaled with tales of anthropomorphic stuffed animals and finding himself completely charmed. "Okay," Sophia announced suddenly, scrambling off her chair. "The cookies should be cool enough now. Mama, can we try them?" Elena checked the cookies, touching one gently. "I think we can handle that. But just one, Sophia. We don't want to spoil dinner." "We're having mac and cheese from a box," Sophia confided to Marcus in a stage whisper. "It's not fancy, but it's my favorite." "Sophia," Elena said, her cheeks reddening again. "I'm sure Mr. Wellington Marcus isn't interested in our dinner plans." But Marcus was interested. He was interested in everything about these two people who had burst into his carefully controlled world and turned it upside down. He was interested in how Elena's eyes crinkled when she smiled at her daughter. He was interested in the way Sophia seemed to find joy in the smallest things. He was interested in this feeling blooming in his chest, something warm and unfamiliar and slightly terrifying. Actually, he heard himself say, "I haven't had mac and cheese from a box in years." "It sounds perfect." Elena stared at him. You want to stay for dinner? If that's all right, Marcus said, and he realized he was nervous. When was the last time he'd been nervous about anything? I understand if you'd rather. No, Elena said quickly, then laughed. I mean, yes, it's fine. It's more than fine. I'm surprised. That's all. Sophia had already selected the 3 best cookies and was bringing them to the table on a small plate. She presented one to Marcus with the seriousness of a knight bestowing a favor. This is the biggest one, she said, because you're tall and tall people need more cookies. Marcus accepted it gravely. Thank you, Sophia. That's very thoughtful. He bit into the cookie and was surprised by how good it was. Not the artisanal, expensive treats he occasionally had delivered from that bakery in Soho, but warm and sweet and made with care. It tasted like home, though Marcus couldn't remember ever having a home that felt like this. It's delicious, he said honestly, and Sophia beamed. Mama's the best baker in the whole world, she declared. She makes cookies for my birthday, and for when I'm sick, and for when she's happy, and for when she's sad. Cookies are for everything. Cookies are not for everything, Elena corrected gently, bringing over glasses of milk. Sometimes we need real food too. But cookies make real food better, Sophia argued, and Marcus found himself nodding in agreement, earning him a delighted giggle from the little girl and an exasperated smile from Elena. As they ate their cookies and drank milk at Marcus's kitchen table, Sophia kept up her constant chatter. She told Marcus about her preschool, about her best friend Lily, who could already write her own name, about the picture she'd painted that was hanging on their refrigerator at home. And slowly, carefully, Marcus found himself asking questions. Learning. Caring. Elena watched this exchange with growing wonder. She'd worked for Marcus Wellington for 6 months, and in all that time, he'd barely spoken more than a few words to her. He'd been a presence in the apartment more than a person, a name on a paycheck, a set of preferences to be accommodated. She knew he took his coffee black, that he preferred his shirts pressed with light starch, that he hated when anyone moved things on his desk. But she'd never known him. Now, watching him listen intently to her daughter's rambling stories, something in Elena's chest loosened. Maybe she'd been wrong about him. Maybe underneath that cold exterior was someone who was just as lonely and lost as she'd been after David died. Mama works very hard, Sophia said suddenly, pulling Elena from her thoughts. She's always tired. Do you make her tired, Marcus? Sophia. Elena gasped, but Marcus was already answering. I probably do, he admitted. I've never really thought about how hard your mama works. But you're right. She works very hard, and she shouldn't have to be so tired all the time. He looked at Elena then, really looked at her, and she felt exposed under his gaze. What did he see? A woman who cleaned houses to make ends meet? A single mother struggling to provide for her child? Someone to be pitied? Tell me about yourself, Marcus said. In 6 months, I've never asked. That was wrong of me. Elena hesitated and used to talking about herself, especially to her employer. But something in Marcus's expression, an openness that hadn't been there before, made her want to try. There's not much to tell, she began, then stopped when she saw Sophia's indignant expression. Her daughter had heard the story many times and clearly felt it deserved better framing. I grew up in Queens. My parents immigrated from Mexico before I was born. I went to community college, studied early childhood education. I wanted to be a teacher. Why aren't you? Marcus asked. Elena glanced at Sophia, who was now coloring again, content to let the adults talk. Life happened. I met David, Sophia's father, and we fell in love. Got married young. He was a construction worker, and I was teaching at a daycare. We were happy. Not rich, but happy. Then I got pregnant with Sophia, and we were over the moon." Her voice wavered slightly, and Marcus waited patiently for her to continue. "David died when Sophia was 6 months old. Accident on a construction site. Faulty scaffolding. The company settled, but it wasn't much, and legal fees ate up most of it. I couldn't afford daycare and work at the same time, so I had to leave my job. Cleaning houses pays better than you'd think, and I can sometimes bring Sophia with me or work around her schedule." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it. That must have been incredibly difficult. Elena shrugged, a gesture that tried for casual but didn't quite make it. "You do what you have to do. Sophia is what matters. Making sure she has what she needs, that she's happy and safe and loved. Everything else is just details." Marcus looked at this woman, this strong, resilient woman who'd suffered a devastating loss and kept going, who worked multiple jobs to provide for her daughter, who still found time to bake cookies and tell stories and be present, and felt something shift inside him. All his accomplishments, all his wealth, all his success, what did any of it mean? What was he building? What legacy was he leaving? "You're an amazing mother," he said quietly. "Sophia is lucky to have you." Elena's eyes filled with tears, and she blinked them back quickly. "Thank you. That means thank you." Sophia, sensing her mother's emotion with that uncanny ability children have, abandoned her coloring and climbed into Elena's lap, wrapping her small arms around her mother's neck. "Don't be sad, Mama," she whispered. "We're okay. We have cookies and each other, and now we have Marcus too." Elena laughed through her tears. "Oh, baby, I don't think Marcus wants to be included in our little family." But Marcus surprised them both. "Actually," he said slowly, "I think I'd like that very much." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning and possibility. Elena stared at him, and Marcus met her gaze steadily. He wasn't sure what he was offering exactly. Friendship? Support? Something more? But he knew with certainty that he didn't want this evening to end. He didn't want to go back to his empty apartment and his empty life. He didn't want to be alone anymore. "How about that mac and cheese?" he said, breaking the tension with a smile. "I'll even help cook if you promise not to judge my culinary skills too harshly." Sophia perked up immediately. "You can stir. Stirring is very important. Mama says so." And so Marcus Wellington III, billionaire businessman, found himself standing at his own stove, stirring a pot of macaroni while Sophia supervised and Elena grated cheese. They bumped into each other in the kitchen, apologized, laughed. They worked together like they'd done this 100 times before, when in reality, this was the first time Marcus had cooked anything in this kitchen. He'd never seen the point when he could afford the best restaurants and private chefs. But this was different. This was real. This was life, messy and imperfect and utterly perfect all at once. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten dinner at his own kitchen table. Usually, he grabbed something from his favorite restaurant on the way home, ate standing up at the counter while reviewing documents, or didn't eat at all. The dining table, an $8,000 piece of imported walnut, had become a glorified mail sorting station, covered in unopened envelopes and business journals he never had time to read. But now, as he helped Sophia set the table with mismatched plates, the only ones he could find that weren't his formal china, the space felt transformed. Elena had discreetly cleared the mail to a side table, and Sophia had insisted on placing a small vase of flowers. Apparently Elena had brought them earlier to brighten up the kitchen, in the center as a centerpiece. "There," Sophia said, standing back to admire her work. "Now it's pretty. Tables should be pretty for dinner. It makes the food taste better." "Does it really?" Marcus asked, charmed by her certainty. "Uh-huh. Mama says when things are pretty, your heart feels happy, and when your heart is happy, everything tastes better." Marcus looked at Elena, who was draining the pasta at the stove. You say a lot of wise things, apparently. She smiled over her shoulder at him. When you're explaining the world to a 3-year-old, you have to make it simple. And sometimes simple is more true than complicated. They sat down to dinner, Sophia between Marcus and Elena, and for a moment, Marcus just looked at the scene. Steam rising from the bowls of macaroni and cheese. Sophia swinging her legs, which didn't quite reach the floor. Elena passing him a bowl with a slightly shy smile.
It was so ordinary.
So wonderfully, beautifully ordinary. Do you say grace? Sophia asked suddenly, her hands already folded. Marcus blinked. I know. I don't usually. We say grace, Sophia informed him. Because Mama says we should always be thankful for what we have, even when things are hard. Do you want to try? Marcus looked helplessly at Elena, who gave him an encouraging nod. Just speak from your heart, she said softly. There's no wrong way. So Marcus, who hadn't prayed since he was a child, who'd long ago decided that faith was for people who needed emotional crutches, bowed his head and closed his eyes. Sophia's small hand slipped into his left hand, Elena's into his right, and the contact grounded him. Thank you, he said quietly, for this food. And for 4 unexpected moments. For second chances. For, he paused, swallowing hard. For not being alone tonight. Amen, Sophia chirped happily, and Elena echoed her softly. When Marcus opened his eyes, Elena was looking at him with such warmth that he had to look away, overwhelmed. The macaroni and cheese was perfect, creamy and comforting, and exactly what Marcus needed, though he hadn't known it. They ate and talked, and Marcus found himself sharing things he never talked about. Elena asked questions, not invasive ones, but gentle inquiries that invited him to open up if he wanted to. He told them about growing up in Connecticut, about parents who were more interested in social standing than in their son, about boarding schools and empty holidays, and learning early that love was conditional, something to be earned through achievement. About his father's disapproval when Marcus chose business over the family's traditional path of law and politics. My father died 3 years ago, Marcus said, pushing macaroni around his bowl. We hadn't spoken in 5 years before that. He died still disappointed in me, even though I'd built something he could never have imagined. Nothing was ever good enough. That must hurt very much, Elena said softly, and her simple acknowledgement of his pain was more healing than any of the therapy sessions his ex-girlfriend had insisted he attend. It did, Marcus admitted. It does. I kept thinking if I'd just made enough money, achieved enough success, he'd finally see me. But he never did. And now he never will. Sophia had been listening quietly, and now she climbed down from her chair and walked around the table to Marcus. Without a word, she climbed into his lap and hugged him, her small arms barely reaching around his chest. My papa can't see me either, she said into his shoulder. He's in heaven. But Mama says he sees me in his heart, and I can see him in mine. Maybe your papa can see you now in a different way. Marcus's eyes burned with unshed tears. He wrapped his arms around this tiny, wise creature and held on, letting himself feel the comfort she was offering. When had anyone last hugged him? Really hugged him, not the brief, professional embraces of business associates or the perfunctory greetings of distant relatives. Thank you, Sophia, he whispered. She pulled back to look at him seriously. You're welcome. You're not so sad now, right? No, Marcus said, and realized it was true. The crushing weight that had been sitting on his chest for years had lifted just a little. I'm not as sad.
Good.
Now you should eat more mac and cheese. Mama made a lot. The rest of the dinner passed in a warm glow. They talked about lighter things. Sophia's upcoming birthday, a trip to the zoo they were planning, Marcus's admission that he'd never actually been to the Bronx Zoo despite living in New York for over a decade. Elena told stories about Sophia's early years, the funny things she'd said and done, and Marcus found himself laughing more than he had in months. After dinner, while Elena washed the dishes despite Marcus's protests that he had a dishwasher, Sophia invited Marcus to play with her. She'd brought a small backpack of toys, and she spread them out on the living room floor, a motley collection of dolls, cars, and the famous Mr. Fluffington. "You can be the dragon," Sophia said, handing him a plastic dragon figure. "But you're a nice dragon, not a mean one. You help the princess instead of scaring her." Marcus settled onto the floor, his expensive suit pants be damned, and played dragons and princesses with a 3-year-old. He did voices. He made his dragon fly through the air, making whooshing sounds. He let Princess Sophia save him when he pretended to be trapped under a pillow mountain. And the whole time, he felt something inside him healing, something he hadn't known was broken. From the kitchen, Elena watched them play, her hands stilled in the dishwater. This man, this billionaire who'd been so cold and distant for 6 months, was lying on his living room floor making airplane noises for her daughter. Sophia was giggling, completely at ease with him, and Marcus was smiling, really smiling, in a way that transformed his entire face. She'd been terrified when he'd come home early, certain she was about to lose her job. And maybe she should still be worried about that. Monday was coming, and with it, the reality of their actual relationship, employer and employee. But right now, in this moment, they felt like something else. Something more. "Mama, come play?" Sophia called. "We need a queen for the castle." Elena dried her hands and joined them on the floor, and for the next hour, they built an elaborate fantasy world on Marcus's designer rug. When Sophia's eyes started to droop, Elena glanced at her watch and gasped. "It's almost 8:30. Sophia, baby, we need to go." "It's way past your bedtime." "But I'm not tired," Sophia protested, even as she rubbed her eyes. "Nice try, Mija," Elena said, gathering the toys. "Say thank you to Marcus for letting us stay." Sophia climbed into Marcus's lap one more time, her head drooping against his shoulder. "Thank you, Marcus. You're not sad anymore. You're my friend now." "Thank you, Sophia," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're my friend too. The best friend I've made in a very long time." Elena got Sophia's shoes on her and gathered their things while Marcus stood awkwardly, not sure what to do with himself. He didn't want them to leave. The thought of them walking out the door and leaving him alone in this apartment again was physically painful. "Elena," he said as she headed toward the door with Sophia in her arms. "Wait." She turned, and he saw his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. "About Monday," he began.
About your job.
"I'm not going to fire you. I was wrong to even threaten it. You're an excellent employee, and what happened today, bringing Sophia, that was my fault for not having better policies in place for emergencies." Relief flooded Elena's face. "Thank you, Mr. Wellington. That means everything." "Marcus," he corrected. "And I was thinking maybe we should talk about adjusting your hours. Or your responsibilities. You mentioned wanting to be a teacher. What if we could work something out that gets you closer to that goal?" Elena stared at him. "I don't understand." "I don't either, completely," Marcus admitted. "But I do know that tonight has been the best evening I've had in years, and I don't want it to be the last time. I'd like to see you both again. As friends, if nothing else. And I'd like to help if you'll let me." "Why?" Elena asked softly. "Why would you do that?" Marcus looked at Sophia, who was already half asleep against her mother's shoulder, then back at Elena. "Because you both reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That life is more than just work and achievement. That connection matters. That I've been living in a mausoleum instead of a home, and I don't want to do that anymore." Tears shimmered in Elena's eyes. "I don't know what to say."
Say you'll think about it.
"Say you'll come back." "Say." He paused, taking a leap of faith.
Say, we can do this again.
"Maybe next week." Elena smiled, and it lit up her whole face. "We'd like that. We'd like that very much."
Good.
Marcus reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from Sophia's sleeping face. "Get her home to bed. And drive safely." "We take the subway," Elena said. "But thank you." The subway. At night. With a sleeping child. The thought made Marcus uncomfortable. "Let me call you a car service."
Please.
"I insist." Elena started to protest, then saw the genuine concern in his eyes and nodded. "Okay. Thank you." While they waited for the car, Marcus gathered the leftover cookies and packed them carefully in a container. He added it to Elena's bag along with something else, an envelope he'd quickly prepared while she'd been getting Sophia ready. "Don't open it until you get home," he said. "Please." The car arrived, and Marcus rode down in the elevator with them, helping Elena get Sophia settled in the car seat the service had provided. As the car pulled away, Sophia woke up just enough to wave at him through the window, and Marcus waved back, standing on the sidewalk until the taillights disappeared. Back in his apartment, the silence felt different than it had before. Not peaceful, exactly, but full of potential. He looked at the kitchen, still showing signs of their impromptu baking session. He looked at the living room, where a few of Sophia's toys still lay scattered. He looked at the dining table, where 3 bowls sat in the sink, waiting to be washed. For the first time in years, Marcus's apartment felt like it had been lived in. And for the first time in years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. Elena didn't open Marcus's envelope until after she'd carried Sophia upstairs to their tiny studio apartment, changed her into pajamas while she barely woke, and tucked her into their shared bed. Their home was one room with a kitchenette, a bathroom smaller than Marcus's closet, and barely enough space to turn around. But it was theirs, and Elena had made it as warm and cheerful as possible with secondhand furniture, handmade curtains, and Sophia's artwork covering every available wall space. After checking that Sophia was sound asleep, Elena finally sat on the edge of the bed and opened the envelope Marcus had given her. Inside was a check that made her gasp so loudly she had to cover her mouth to avoid waking Sophia. $10,000. And a note, written in Marcus's precise handwriting. "Elena, this is not charity. This is an apology for 6 months of not seeing you as a person, for treating you as invisible, for not asking about your life, your dreams, your struggles. Consider it a retroactive bonus for exceptional work or a grant toward whatever future you want to build. Use it however you need. More importantly, I meant what I said about helping you get closer to teaching. I have connections at several schools in the city. If you're interested, I'd like to make some calls. Thank you for today. Thank you for letting me be part of your world, even briefly. You and Sophia have given me something I didn't know I was missing. Marcus." Elena read the note 3 times, tears streaming down her face. $10,000 could mean so much. Catching up on bills that had been piling up. Finally fixing the leak in the ceiling that their landlord kept ignoring. Maybe even starting to save for a real apartment with a bedroom for Sophia. But it was the second part of the note that made her cry hardest. Someone saw her. Someone recognized her worth beyond her ability to clean a house. Someone wanted to help her achieve her dreams, not because he felt sorry for her, but because he believed she deserved better. She looked at Sophia, sleeping peacefully with Mr. Fluffington clutched to her chest. Her daughter had done this somehow. With her innocent questions and her generous heart and her ability to see past Marcus's walls to the lonely person underneath. Sophia had given both Marcus and Elena a gift today, the gift of connection. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus, though she'd never given him her personal number. He must have pulled it from her employment file. Did I overstep? I'm realizing I might have made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention. Elena smiled through her tears and typed back. You didn't overstep. Thank you doesn't feel like enough, but thank you. For everything. For seeing us. The reply came quickly. Thank you for letting me see. Sleep well. Both of you. Elena held the phone to her chest, feeling something flutter in her heart that she hadn't felt since David died. Not quite attraction, it was too soon for that, too complicated, but possibility. The possibility that maybe her life could be more than just surviving. That maybe Sophia could have more than just a struggling mother barely making ends meet. That maybe, just maybe, she herself could be more than just the grief-stricken widow and exhausted single mother she'd become. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Elena went to sleep with a smile on her face. Marcus didn't sleep well, but it wasn't the usual insomnia driven by stress and work anxiety. Instead, he lay awake thinking about Sophia's laughter, Elena's quiet strength, and the way his apartment had felt alive for those few hours. He thought about how naturally he'd played make-believe on his living room floor, something he couldn't remember doing even as a child. He thought about the grace before dinner, and how holding hands with Elena and Sophia had felt like being part of something sacred. Around midnight, he got up and walked through his apartment, really looking at it for the first time in years. The expensive art on the walls that he'd bought because his decorator said it was a good investment. The furniture that was stylish but uncomfortable. The complete absence of anything personal, anything that reflected who he was or what he cared about. Who was he? Beyond his business success, beyond his wealth, who was Marcus Wellington? He didn't have an answer, and that terrified him. But maybe, he thought, maybe that was okay. Maybe not knowing meant he could become someone different. Someone better. Someone who made cookies with children and shared mac and cheese dinners and played dragons on the floor. His phone rang, startling him. The caller ID showed his assistant, James, calling from Jakarta. James? Is everything okay? It's the middle of the night there. I know, sir. I'm sorry to call so late your time, but I have news about the Jakarta deal. Marcus's stomach clenched. What about it? The bureaucrat who killed it? He's been removed from his position. Corruption charges. The new minister wants to reopen negotiations. Says they're very interested in moving forward quickly. Sir, I think we can still make this happen. 6 months ago, 6 hours ago, this news would have electrified Marcus. He would have been on the next plane to Jakarta, ready to close the deal personally. But now, standing in his empty apartment still smelling faintly of chocolate chip cookies, he surprised himself. That's great news, James. But you handle it. You've been on this from the beginning. You know it inside and out. I trust you to close it. There was a long pause. Sir, are you sure? This is a $200 million deal. I'm sure. You'll do a better job than I would anyway. You've earned this. Send me updates, but you're the lead now. After he hung up, Marcus stood in the dark and laughed. He'd just handed off the biggest deal of the quarter to his assistant without a second thought. His father would have been apoplectic. The old Marcus would have been apoplectic. But the new Marcus, or maybe the real Marcus, the one who'd been buried under years of ambition and fear, felt nothing but relief. The weekend passed in a blur of activity for Marcus. Saturday morning, instead of going into the office as he usually did, he went to a toy store. He told himself he was just going to pick up something small for Sophia, but he ended up spending 2 hours there, consulting with a sales associate about age-appropriate toys, and leaving with several bags full of purchases. Educational but fun, he'd instructed. Nothing that makes annoying noises. Books are good. Art supplies. Things that encourage creativity. The sales associate had smiled knowingly. First-time parent? Not exactly, Marcus had said, then realized he didn't know how to explain what exactly he was. A friend? A mentor? Something else entirely? He'd also spent Saturday afternoon researching early childhood education programs in New York. He made notes about different schools, their requirements, their costs. He drafted an email to the Dean of Education at Columbia, someone he'd met at a fundraiser years ago, asking about evening and weekend programs for working parents. Sunday, he did something he hadn't done in years. He went to church. Not because he'd suddenly found religion, but because Sophia's simple grace before dinner had reminded him of something his grandmother used to say. Sometimes you need to sit in silence and listen for what matters. The church was small, tucked between two brownstones in the West Village. The service was simple, the congregation mixed and welcoming. Marcus sat in the back and listened to a sermon about the Good Samaritan, about seeing the humanity in strangers, about the radical act of kindness. When the pastor spoke about how we often pass by people in need because we're too focused on our own destinations, Marcus felt the words pierce his heart. How many people had he passed by in his single-minded pursuit of success? How many Alina's and Sophia's had been invisible to him? After the service, as Marcus was leaving, an elderly woman stopped him. "You're new," she said, smiling. "Welcome. I'm Margaret." "Marcus," he said, shaking her hand. "Thank you. You look troubled, if you don't mind me saying so." Marcus considered denying it, then decided honesty might be easier. "I'm trying to figure out how to be a better person. I'm not sure I know how." Margaret patted his hand. "Well, that's a good start. Most people never even ask the question. Come back next week. The journey is easier with company." Marcus found himself promising he would. Monday morning arrived, and with it, Elena's scheduled workday. Marcus had been up since dawn, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first big presentation in business school. He'd tidied the apartment himself, something he never did, and had fresh flowers delivered. He'd also prepared a detailed proposal about her employment, something he'd worked on all Sunday evening. When Elena arrived, she was alone. Marcus tried not to show his disappointment about Sophia's absence. "She's at preschool," Elena explained, seeing his expression. "They have a full-day program on Mondays. I was able to get her in with some assistance from a local charity."
Oh.
"Of course." Marcus cleared his throat. "Elena, before you start work, could we talk? I have some ideas I'd like to discuss with you." Elena nodded, looking nervous, and followed him to the living room. Marcus had never invited her to sit in his living room before, and she perched uncertainly on the edge of the sofa. "First," Marcus began, "I want to apologize again for Friday. Not just for threatening to fire you, but for the 6 months before that. You've worked for me for half a year, and I've never once asked if you needed anything. If your schedule worked for you. If you had concerns or suggestions. That was wrong of me. Mr. Wellington. Marcus, please." "Marcus," Elena continued, though she still looked uncomfortable using his first name. "You've been a good employer. You pay well, you're never home to make messes, and you've always been professional." "Professional," Marcus repeated. "That's a kind way of saying distant. Cold." Elena didn't deny it, and Marcus appreciated her honesty. "I want to change that," he said. "Not just with you, but in how I live my life. Friday was transformative for me. I realized I've been existing, not living, and I want to do better. Be better. Part of that means being better to the people in my life, including you." He handed her a folder. "I put together a proposal. It's not a requirement. You can absolutely say no, and your current position is secure regardless. But I wanted to offer you some options." Elena opened the folder, her eyes widening as she read. Marcus had outlined 3 different possibilities. Option 1. Reduce her cleaning hours but maintain her full salary, with the freed-up time for her to pursue education or training in early childhood education. He'd included information about 3 different programs, including one at Columbia that he'd already confirmed had rolling admission and offered substantial financial aid. Option 2. Transition her to a different role, helping him establish a charitable foundation focused on supporting single parents. She'd get relevant experience, a better title for her resume, and still have flexibility for Sophia. Option 3. A combination of both. Part-time with a foundation, part-time education, with Marcus covering her tuition costs as part of her compensation package. "I don't understand," Elena whispered, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "Why would you do this?" "Because you deserve it," Marcus said simply. "Because Sophia deserves a mother who gets to pursue her dreams. Because I can afford to do this, and what good is money if you don't use it to make the world a little better? And selfishly, because I want you and Sophia in my life. This way, we can still see each other regularly, but you won't feel like you're just my employee. We can be friends. Real friends." Elena was crying openly now. "I've spent 3 years just trying to keep our heads above water. Just trying to survive. And you're offering me a chance to actually live again. To dream again. I don't know how to accept this." "Say yes," Marcus said. "That's all you have to do. Say yes, and we'll figure out the details together." "Yes," Elena said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Good. That's really good." They spent the next 2 hours going over the details, drinking coffee, and planning. Elena was drawn to option 3, the combination approach. She could do part-time work helping Marcus set up the foundation while also taking evening classes toward her teaching credential. It would be challenging, but for the first time in years, Elena felt like she could see a future beyond just the next bill, the next month, the next crisis. "There's one more thing," Marcus said as they were wrapping up. "I bought some things for Sophia. I hope that's okay. They're in the guest room. There are quite a few boxes. I may have gotten a little carried away." Elena followed him to the guest room and gasped. Marcus had indeed gotten carried away. There were art supplies, books, educational toys, a child-sized easel, and at least a dozen stuffed animals. "Marcus, this is too much," she protested. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I wanted to. And I was hoping, would it be all right if Sophia visited sometimes? Maybe she could do her art here while you're working on foundation stuff? I have plenty of space, and I thought I'd like to be part of her life. If that's okay with you." Elena looked at this man who'd been a stranger a few days ago and was now offering her family more generosity than she'd dared to dream of. She thought about Sophia's instant connection with him, about the way he'd played dragons on the floor, about the sadness in his eyes that her daughter had seen so clearly. "She called you her friend," Elena said softly. "And Sophia is a very good judge of character. If she thinks you're worthy of friendship, then I do too." "I'll try to be worthy of it," Marcus promised. "You already are," Elena said. 3 months later, Marcus's apartment had undergone a transformation. Oh, it still looked expensive. You couldn't erase years of professional decorating overnight, but now it felt lived in. There was a basket of Sophia's toys in the living room corner. The refrigerator was decorated with her artwork, held up by magnets Marcus had special ordered that said things like future artist and masterpiece. The guest room had been converted into a space that was part playroom, part study area for Elena. And every Tuesday and Thursday evening, Marcus came home not to silence, but to the sound of laughter and conversation. Tonight was Tuesday, and as Marcus rode the elevator up to his penthouse, he could already hear music playing. He smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The Jakarta deal had closed successfully, James had done brilliant work, and Marcus had barely been involved. He discovered that delegating didn't make him weak or unnecessary. It made him a better leader and freed him to focus on things that actually mattered. like making it home in time for dinner with Elena and Sophia. "We're here," he called out as he entered, and immediately Sophia came running from the kitchen, her arms outstretched. "Marcus, Marcus, guess what we made?" Marcus scooped her up, spinning her around as she giggled. This had become their greeting ritual, and he loved it more every time. "Let me guess, cookies?"
No. Better.
"We made pizza. From scratch. Mama, let me throw the dough in the air like they do on TV." "Did you catch it?" Marcus asked seriously. "Mostly," Sophia admitted. "Some of it went on the floor. But we have the 5-second rule, right, Mama?" "We do not have a 5-second rule for dough that goes on the floor," Elena said, emerging from the kitchen with an apron on and flour in her hair. She looked beautiful, Marcus thought. She always did, but especially when she was relaxed and happy like this. Over the past 3 months, their relationship had deepened into something Marcus treasured more than any business success. They'd become genuine friends, sharing meals and stories and the everyday details of their lives. Marcus had learned that Elena sang off-key in the shower and that she was terrible at math but brilliant at solving emotional problems. Elena had learned that Marcus had a sweet tooth he tried to hide and that he'd never learned to ride a bike because his parents thought it was beneath them. They'd also learned to parent Sophia together, though Marcus was careful never to overstep. He wasn't her father, and he would never try to replace David in her heart. But he was something, a trusted adult, a friend, someone who loved her unconditionally and showed up consistently. He went to her preschool performances and sat through endless tea parties with Mr. Fluffington and read the same bedtime stories over and over without complaint. "The pizza will be ready in 20 minutes, Elena said. "How was your day?" "Good," Marcus said, setting Sophia down so she could run back to whatever she'd been doing. "Really good, actually. I want to run something by you." They settled at the kitchen counter while Sophia colored at the table, and Marcus pulled out his tablet. "I've been working on the foundation structure, and I think we're ready to officially launch. But I want your input on the mission statement. You're better at this than I am." This had become another ritual, Marcus asking for Elena's advice on things he used to think he had to figure out alone. She had a way of seeing the human element in everything, of cutting through corporate jargon to what actually mattered. Under her influence, the foundation they were creating was going to be revolutionary, not just providing financial assistance to single parents, but comprehensive support including childcare, education, counseling, and job training. They worked together for a while, tweaking language and arguing good-naturedly about whether certain programs should be included in the first phase or rolled out later. This was Marcus's favorite part of his day now, not the board meetings or the deal negotiations, but these quiet moments of collaboration with someone who challenged him and made him think differently. "You know what?" Elena said suddenly. "You've changed so much since that first night. Sometimes I look at you and can hardly believe you're the same person who threatened to fire me for bringing Sophia here." Marcus winced at the memory. "Please don't remind me. I was such an ass." "You were sad," Elena corrected gently.
Sophia was right about that.
"You were sad and lonely, and you'd forgotten how to be anything else. And now?" Marcus asked. Elena smiled. "Now you're happy. It shows in everything you do. The way you walk, the way you talk to people, even the way you look. You're lighter somehow." "That's because of you," Marcus said quietly. "Both of you. You gave me my life back. Or maybe you gave me a life for the first time. I'm not sure I ever really had one before." They looked at each other across the counter, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding and connection that went deeper than friendship. Marcus had been careful not to push, not to make Elena uncomfortable. She was his employee, technically, even though the relationship had evolved far beyond that. She was also still grieving her husband, still finding her own footing in the world. The last thing Marcus wanted was to complicate things by admitting that what he felt for her had grown into something more than friendship. But in that moment, he wondered if Elena might feel it too, that pull, that possibility, that sense that they were building towards something neither of them had quite put into words yet. The timer went off, breaking the moment, and Elena jumped up to check the pizza.
Perfect, she announced.
Sophia, honey, wash your hands. Dinner's ready. They ate together at the table, Sophia chattering about her day at preschool and the picture she was making for Marcus's office. It's a dragon, she explained seriously. A nice dragon like you. To remind you to be nice even when work is hard. I love it, Marcus said. It'll have a place of honor right on my desk. After dinner, while Elena cleaned up despite Marcus's protests, Sophia asked if she could show Marcus the dance she'd learned in school. He watched as she twirled and jumped around the living room, her face scrunched up in concentration as she tried to remember all the moves. When she finished, breathless and beaming, Marcus applauded enthusiastically. That was amazing. You're a natural dancer. I want to take real dance classes, Sophia said, climbing into his lap. The ones where you get to wear tutus and learn ballet. But Mama says they're expensive. Marcus glanced at Elena, who was watching from the kitchen with a worried expression. They talked about this, about the balance between Marcus wanting to help and Elena wanting to maintain her independence and not have Sophia grow up expecting other people to pay for everything. Tell you what, Marcus said carefully. What if we make a deal? You help me with something, and in exchange, we figure out the dance class situation. What do I have to help you with? Sophia asked suspiciously. Well, I'm planning a big event for the foundation launch. It's going to be fancy with lots of important people who have money that could help other families like yours. And I'm terrible at parties. I never know what to say to people. So I was thinking maybe you could come with me and help me remember to smile and be nice. What do you think? Sophia considered this gravely. That's a big job. It is, Marcus agreed. Very important. And worth at least, shall we say 6 months of dance classes? Marcus, Elena said warningly, but she was smiling. A year, Sophia countered, and Marcus laughed. You drive a hard bargain. Okay, a year. But you have to actually help me at the party. Deal? Deal. Sophia sealed it with a high five that Marcus was sure would leave his hand stinging. Later, after Sophia had fallen asleep on the couch mid-movie, Marcus carried her to the guest room where they'd set up a small bed for nights when it got too late for Elena to take her home on the subway. He tucked her in carefully, placing Mr. Fluffington in her arms, and stood watching her sleep for a moment. This child had changed his entire life. This small, fearless, loving person had looked at him and seen past all his defenses to the lonely person underneath. She'd called him sad when no one else had dared to, and in doing so, she'd given him permission to acknowledge his own pain.
To heal. To change.
Thank you, he whispered to her sleeping form. Thank you for saving me. Elena was waiting in the hallway when he emerged.
She's out cold, Marcus said.
I think the dance performance took all her energy. She loves performing for you, Elena said. You're very important to her, you know. She talks about you all the time. Marcus said this, and Marcus thinks that, and when can we see Marcus again? She's important to me too, Marcus said. You both are. More important than anything else in my life. They stood in the dim hallway, the city lights twinkling through the windows, and Marcus felt the moment shift into something significant. Elena was looking at him with an expression he'd seen growing more frequent over the past few weeks, something tender and wondering and maybe, just maybe, something more. Marcus, she said softly, can I tell you something? Anything. When David died, I thought that was it for me. I thought I'd had my chance at happiness, and now my job was just to be a good mother to Sophia. I didn't think I'd ever feel anything again beyond just endurance. Just getting through each day. Marcus waited, barely breathing. But these past 3 months, Elena continued, you've reminded me that I'm more than just a mother. I'm a person with dreams and goals, and the capacity to feel joy again. You've been so good to us, so patient and generous and kind. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of you as my employer or even just my friend, and started thinking of you as someone I could maybe... She trailed off, blushing, and Marcus gently took her hand. As someone you could maybe what? he prompted softly. As someone I could maybe love, Elena finished in a rush. If that's not crazy. If it's not too soon. If you feel anything like that too. Marcus felt his heart expand in his chest. Elena, I've been in love with you for weeks. Maybe longer. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. You've been through so much, and I didn't want to be just another complication in your life. You're not a complication, Elena said, squeezing his hand. You're the best thing that's happened to us since David died. Sophia loves you. And I think I'm falling in love with you too. They stood there, hands clasped, smiling at each other like teenagers with their first crush. Marcus wanted to kiss her. He'd wanted to kiss her for so long, but he also wanted to do this right. To take it slow. To make sure she was sure. Can I take you to dinner? He asked. A real date. Just the two of us? We can get a babysitter for Sophia, go somewhere nice, and just see where this goes. I'd like that, Elena said. I'd like that very much. They made plans for that weekend, both giddy with possibility, and then Elena gathered her things to go home. At the door, Marcus couldn't resist anymore. He pulled her into a hug, holding her close and breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the flour that still dusted her clothes. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. For seeing me, for giving me a chance, for everything. Thank you for being someone worth seeing, Elena whispered back. After she left, Marcus walked through his apartment, looking at all the signs of life that now filled it. Sophia's toys. Elena's textbooks on the counter. Photos they'd taken together stuck to the fridge. The drawing Sophia had made of the three of them holding hands, with a big sun smiling down on them. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother, whom he'd reconnected with recently. She was asking if he was coming to the family Christmas gathering this year. I'll be there, he typed back. And I'm bringing some people I'd like you to meet. Another message, this one from James, updating him on a new potential deal in Singapore. Looks good, Marcus replied. But keep the travel minimal. I have commitments here I don't want to miss. Commitments. Like Tuesday and Thursday dinners. Like Sophia's upcoming dance recital. Like the foundation launch party, where a 3-year-old would be his co-host. Like Sunday morning church service with Margaret, who'd become an unexpected friend and mentor. Like the life he was building, brick by brick, relationship by relationship. Marcus looked at his reflection in the window. The city spread out behind him like a carpet of stars. The man looking back at him was different from the one who'd stormed into this apartment 3 months ago, furious and empty and alone. This man had laugh lines starting at the corners of his eyes. This man smiled easily. This man knew how to play make-believe and bake cookies and say grace before dinner. This man had been saved by a little girl who'd called him sad and had decided, with the boundless optimism of a 3-year-old, that cookies could fix anything. She'd been right. Not about the cookies specifically, though those had helped, but about the truth that underneath his anger and his achievements and his armor, Marcus Wellington had been desperately sad. Sad and lonely and hungry for connection in a way he'd never let himself acknowledge. Sophia had seen it. Elena had nurtured it. Together, they'd given him something no amount of money could buy. A family. A home. A reason to come back at the end of each day. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Elena. Sophia woke up in the car and asked when she could see you again. I told her Thursday. She said that's too far away. I agree. Marcus smiled and typed back. Tell her we'll have a video call tomorrow before bed. And tell her Marcus says she's the best dragon consultant in the whole world. And Elena? I agree too. Thursday is too far away. He hit send and stood in his living room, his home, feeling grateful in a way he'd never experienced before. Grateful for second chances. Grateful for tiny voices asking hard questions. Grateful for women who made cookies and taught him about grace. Grateful for the capacity to change, even when you think you've become too set in your ways. Most of all, grateful that one Friday evening, when he'd come home furious and ready to fire his maid, a little girl had looked at him with wisdom beyond her years and called him exactly what he was: sad. And then, with the pure magic that only children possess, she decided to do something about it. Marcus looked at Sophia's drawing on his fridge one more time, the three of them holding hands, the sun smiling down. Tomorrow, he'd frame it and put it in his office, right next to the dragon picture she'd promised him. Reminders of what really mattered, of who he wanted to be. And they would return. Thursday and every Tuesday and Thursday after that, and eventually, if Marcus had his way, every single day. Because this was no longer just his apartment. This was home.
The end.